The newspaper crinkled softly between my fingers as I flipped another page, sipping my tea and half listening to the hum of the morning. It was an ordinary day or so, I thought. The headlines screamed of problems far bigger than me: politics, disasters, and endless conflicts. I shook my head, muttering under my breath about how the world seemed to be falling apart. When suddenly, my son reached out and snatched the newspaper right out of my hands. I was startled, ready to scold him for his rudeness, but the look on his face silenced me instantly. His eyes were steady, burning with something I couldn't quite name. Then he said words so shocking, so unexpected, that they pierced through the fog of my morning and changed everything I believed about Haymond, about myself. He held the paper tight, as if guarding me from it. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling but firm, "why do you keep reading about problems without doing anything about them?" For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My instinct was to defend myself, to say I was just staying informed, just keeping up with the world. But the way he looked at Millicent, yet unyielding, made those excuses wither on my tongue. He placed the newspaper on the table and leaned closer. We read about hunger, about kids without schools, about families losing their homes. What do we actually do? Why can't we be part of the solution? The question hit me harder than any headline ever had. My son, still young enough to be in school, was asking me something I had avoided asking myself for years. I stared at him, realizing that he wasn't just curious, he was challenging me. He had seen the pattern: me shaking my head, me sighing at the news, me complaining over breakfast, but never moving beyond words. I wanted to tell him that life was complicated, that change was difficult, that one person couldn't make much difference. But as I opened my mouth, I saw the disappointment already starting to form in his eyes. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't give him the same tired excuses. So instead, I asked him, "What would you do?" His expression softened. And then something incredible happened. He pulled out a notebook from his backpack, just like he had been waiting for this question all along. Inside were pages filled with scribbles, drawings, and ideas. He had written plans for small projects we could do together: organizing a food drive for families in need, collecting old books to donate to schools, planting trees in our neighborhood. They weren't grand political solutions, but they were real, tangible, and filled with hope. As he explained each idea, his hands moved with excitement, his voice rising with passion, and I sat there stunned. This was my son, the same boy I thought spent his time only on games and cartoons, now speaking like a young leader with a heart for change. I realized then that the newspaper in my hands had been weighing me down for years, filling me with helplessness. But in his hands, that same paper had sparked a challenge, a fire, a dream. He wasn't asking me to change the whole world. He was asking me to start with what we could do right where we were. And though I was shaken to my core, I also felt something else rise within me, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was right. Little did I know, his shocking words that morning were only the beginning of a journey that would transform not only me, but our entire community. I couldn't stop thinking about what he said that morning. The words echoed in my head. As I went through my day, why do you keep reading about problems without doing anything about them? It was like he had pulled a curtain back and exposed the truth I had been ignoring for years. I realized how many mornings I had filled with sighs, complaints, and hopelessness instead of action. That evening, when I came home, I found him at the dining table again with his notebook open. This time he wasn't just scribbling ideas. He had drawn up a list of names, friends from school, neighbors, even his teacher people he thought might be willing to help. When I asked him what he was planning, he explained with the kind of excitement only a child can carry. "Dad, we can't fix everything, but we can start with one thing. It's just one. What if we gather food for families who don't have enough? Right here in our town." I stared at him, stunned. He had already spoken to the store owner down the street about placing a donation box. He had designed little flyers on his computer. He had even convinced his classmates to bring extra cans from home. And there I was, the adult, the one who thought I knew better, realizing that my son was already 3 steps ahead of me. That Saturday, we carried an old cardboard box to the grocery store and placed it near the entrance. My son taped one of his hand-drawn flyers to the front. Asterisk, share what you can, help someone smile. For the first hour, people walked past with polite nods. I expected it to fail, but then a woman dropped in a bag of rice. K-Man added a pack of noodles. Soon, the box filled faster than we could empty it. By the afternoon, we had to replace it with a bigger container. My son's eyes sparkled as he greeted each person with a thank you, small frame radiating a sense of purpose far beyond his age. The following week, we delivered the collected food to a local shelter. I'll never forget the look on the faces of the families who received it. Some were shy, some tearful, but all were grateful. My son didn't gloat or brag. He simply nodded and whispered, "To me, this is just the beginning." In that moment, I understood what had kept me silent all these years. Fear. Fear that what I did wouldn't matter. Fear that my effort was too small. But watching my son, I realized he didn't see small as a weakness. He saw it as a start. From then on, the notebook became our family guide. Each page was a new project: planting flowers along the dull gray sidewalk near our home, collecting books for children who couldn't afford them, even teaching neighbors how to recycle more effectively. Some ideas were simple, others ambitious. But all of them carried the same heartbeat. Do something instead of nothing, and every time I doubted. He reminded me of that morning when he took the newspaper from my hands. "Reading problems won't solve them," he'd say with a grin. Little by little, I began to notice changes in myself, too. I wasn't just his father anymore, I was his partner in hope. I started to look at the news differently. Instead of seeing only despair, I began asking myself, asterisk, what can we do, even in the smallest way? That shift, born from his shocking words, was shaping me into someone I didn't expect to become. But deep down, I knew the real test was yet to come. Because dreams and ideas are easy to write down, living them out, day after day, when challenges rise that would demand everything from us both. The test came sooner than I expected. Rainy afternoon, as my son and I were carrying another box of food to the shelter, a group of teenagers across the street laughed and shouted, "What's the point? You're not changing anything." Their words sliced through the air like cold wind. For a split second, I saw my son falter. His shoulders tensed, his steps slowed. I feared this would crush his spirit. But then, to my surprise, he straightened up and said quietly, "They don't see it yet, Dad. But the families we help, they see it." Those words shook me because they didn't come from me, the adult. They came from him, my son, teaching me resilience I had long forgotten. Everyone dismissed us, though. The little projects began to ripple further than we imagined. The store owner who gave us space for our food box offered to sponsor more. A teacher reached out to ask if she could bring her whole class to help. Even the mayor's office sent a letter of appreciation, though my son shrugged it off as unimportant. "I don't care about the attention," he told me one night. "I care about the people." I realized then how pure his mission was. He wasn't doing this for recognition, but for impact. He wasn't chasing applause. He was chasing change. One evening, I caught myself staring at the newspaper again, but this time something was different. The headlines hadn't changed. Wars still raged. Disasters still unfolded. Politics still bickered, but I had changed. I no longer felt helpless. Instead, I thought of my son's notebook, the growing list of projects, and the smiles we had already witnessed. For the first time in years, I believed that even though we couldn't fix everything, we could still make our corner of the world brighter. That realization alone kept me awake, not with worry, but with a fire I hadn't felt in a long time. My son's shocking words that morning had not only pulled me out of my comfort zone, They had given me back my sense of purpose. I had spent years being a passive observer, reading about life instead of living it. But he reminded me that action, however small, carries more weight than 1,000 size over headlines. The boy who I thought needed guidance had, in truth, become my guide. And every time I watch him flip open his notebook with that same spark in his eyes, I silently thank the day he took the newspaper out of my hands. Now, I want to ask you something. How many times have you shaken your head at the news, whispered, that the world is broken, and then turned the page? What if, instead of turning away, you chose to take even the smallest step toward change? Tell me in the comments what's one simple action you would start today if you stopped just reading about problems and began solving them.